So episode 4 of Disventure Camp just came out. Let's talk about it. Now this episode is very interesting. Let me just say up front that Disventure Camp has had some bad episodes, some really bad, completely unsalvageable episodes, and this episode is not one of them. Which honestly came as a huge surprise to me because based on what I heard about the episode prior to actually watching it, I thought it was gonna suck. I mean, when you wake up at 2 p.m. in the afternoon to a Smarty Lion video that looks like this, a Corza Corpse DM that looks like this, and nothing from Silly Billy because I don't know, his house is being infested by termites, you start to have certain expectations going into the episode. But this one left me pretty satisfied, so allow me to explain to you what this episode does right. First and foremost, the sigh of relief I let out when Spencer said he wasn't interested in Diego was, oh my god, that was such a huge weight off my shoulders. Now, I talked a lot about these two in the last video, so I'm not going to do that here, but needless to say, I think this decision was the right call. Because as a result of them not focusing on Spenciego, these two characters got to do other things, and I think this is the best episode for both of them for that reason. I still don't really like Spencer, but compared to the last few episodes, this was a big step up for him, so gotta give him some credit where it's due. Someone else I'd like to give credit to is Benji, because I think I finally understand what they're going for with him. After episode 1, I was really worried that his whole bit was gonna be, ha ha ha, sex joke, funny, do you get it, do you get the joke, wow, this character's so funny, you should like totally cosplay him in all the cons because they're so funny. But no, I think this episode did a really good job of showing who Benji is meant to be, which is a complete and utter failboy who's trying his best, but he's just so bad at everything, and I think that's funny. He's clearly not meant to be taken seriously, which I think is good for now considering how many plot lines are currently going on. I think if he added another one on top of that, that would just muddy things up, so him being able to chime in with an occasional joke is what I think he needs to do. He also gave Jade and Spencer an outlet to be funny, which I didn't think was possible, so yeah, double props for that. I think this scene is really funny. The Vibe Trio is as good as always. They're not a focus of this episode, so they don't really have too many scenes, but they're still fun regardless. Zayd and Ivy have really good chemistry together, and Tristan's fake death was a pretty fun scene. In general, this episode had a lot of jokes that I liked. Granted, it's not BFDIA levels of funny, but I really do appreciate the attempt to make things more lighthearted. I like the Diego and Hannah stuff too. It's not peak writing or anything, but it's nice to see these two interact with people outside of their two main confidants. It's really weird to see Diego act like a well-adjusted human being, but you know what? I want him to have more interactions like these. As long as he has more interactions with Hannah and a lot less with Spencer, I think we're gonna be good. I definitely didn't go into this episode thinking that Logan of all people was gonna be one of my favorites, but sure enough, he's really good here. I would have preferred 1 or 2 more scenes with Natalia specifically, because I think that would have hammered in that these two are really becoming friends, and that would have explained her decision later to try and include him in the vote. But that's less a problem with the episode, and more of me just wanting Natalia to get more focus, because she's kind of been sidelined these past few episodes. But obviously, all of Logan's best scenes are with Anastasia. In most older shows, these two probably would become a couple, as Linda implied, but I like that Disventure Camp instead decided to make them friendly rivals, because that really fits both of their characters. For a character like Anastasia, who clearly does not have a high opinion of men and has certainly been mistreated by them in the past, Logan is probably the best character she could have been paired up with. After all, who better to dismantle her men ain't shit attitude than the one guy who thrives off of good sportsmanship? I don't think I've been this excited for a Disventure Camp dynamic since, well, ever, really. As of this episode, Logan went from someone I thought was pretty good to someone that I really like. And Anastasia went from a character I really like to probably the most interesting character in the season. This is exactly the type of character writing that I thought Odd Nations needed to work on after All-Stars. And not only are they doing that, they're doing a good job, so I feel like I have to give credit where it's due. This is really good. So in terms of character writing going forward, I hope we get a lot more of this, and a lot less of this. If that's what's in store for us in future episodes, then I think we're golden. There is, of course, one other prominent plotline that takes place this episode, and to my knowledge, this is what most people are talking about, so let's go over Linda, Richard, and Ted. I'll just play the clip.
I hear ya. My husband always gets more love from our daughter.
Sorry, husband?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't understand.
People are gay, Linda.
Is, that a problem?
No, it's just... I hope your daughter is okay.
What is that supposed to mean?
Well, how did she adapt?
Well, I think what Linda means is...
I'm just curious. No need to be so uptight, Richard.
I'm going to leave now.
Ugh, he is so dramatic. Tell me I'm wrong, Ted.
Yeah. Well, I'm fucked.
Now, in my personal opinion, this scene is really good. I like how the scene starts with the three characters getting along, only for Linda to put her foot in her mouth, causing things to go sour. We already knew something like this would happen based on the intro, so this whole thing was a matter of when and why. Despite the fact that they don't really scream at each other or come to blows or anything, the actual argument itself is incredibly uncomfortable and jarring, which I do believe is the point. And as awkward as this scene is, thankfully Ted is there to provide some levity throughout and at the very end with his confessional. Not all dramatic scenes need this kind of humor to break up the tension, but given that this is the last scene before the challenge, I think it was the right call here. But obviously, that's not the main thing we need to go over with this scene, and if you've been involved in discussion at all recently, then you know what this is about. For my money, no, I do not think that Linda is homophobic, although I do think she is prejudiced. Here's what you gotta keep in mind. People who are raised conservative are led to believe in these outdated gender roles, that men are the providers, they go to work, they're in charge of the house, while the women cook, clean, and take care of the children. And, you know, obviously we know that's not right anymore, but this is what Linda was raised on. She was probably led to believe that all families need a man and a woman in charge, or else there's something missing. Conservatives define parents less on who they are and more on what they do, so when Linda hears that Richard is gay, her thoughts don't go to the fact that his daughter has two dads, it's that she doesn't have a mom. So I'm guessing she's viewing Richard's family the same way she would if he was a single dad, thinking that something is missing when there really isn't. And Richard is fucking pissed at this, because Linda is basically implying that he and his husband aren't really adequate parents for their daughter, which is something that I imagine he's had to deal with a lot in his life given that he's an older man. Linda is being offensive here, but a lot of people think that homophobia is just being outwardly cruel and malicious towards gay people, so anything less than that is not homophobic. And because there are a lot of queer people in this community, I think we can all tell that this isn't the case, that Linda's doing something wrong and that she needs to change. And I personally hope that going forward, Richard is going to be the guy that helps her with this. This is Richard's best episode by a long shot, and I'm really excited to see what happens with him next, both because of this plotline and how the elimination unfolds. Overcoming ignorance is always something I like to see, and given that these two end up in kind of a good spot at the end of the episode, I'm hopeful that this will be what happens. I doubt that a lot of people like Linda actually watch Disventure Camp, but even still, this is something that we can learn from. As a queer person, you're likely going to face a fair share of insensitive comments, and sometimes you might not get the kind of support you need from someone close to you. A lot of people like Linda grew up in a time where being gay or trans was taboo, and so even if they don't have any intense negative feelings towards this community, they still don't really see it as normal, and that sucks. But I personally choose to believe that most of the people on Earth are good, if a little ill-informed. That's why I think it's important to teach people like Linda about the queer community. I think if we take the time to explain to them how their comments are hurtful, what they should avoid doing, and what they could do instead, I think a lot of these ignorant people would realize their mistakes and learn to treat us better. Granted, not everyone is like that. People like Yule do exist in real life, and oftentimes they don't care about how their actions affect others. Those people do not care to learn, and they are not worth your time. But being malicious and being uninformed are two different things, which is why I think we should afford some of these people a little patience and understanding, because they might come out of it on the other end as an ally. That's something I think Richard and Linda touch on very well in this episode, and while I'd prefer this storyline to be expanded upon, I think as is, it gets that message across fairly well. I really hope that Linda doesn't go off the rails in a later episode and render this section totally pointless, but I trust the direction Odd Nations is going. Major props for this one. Now the last thing I have to talk about is the person who got eliminated, which, as you all know by now, was our good old pal
Ted Gordon.
Ted Gordon.
Sans Undertale.
No, he's not fucking Sans!
MEGALOVANIA.
I know a lot of people have conflicting thoughts about Ted's elimination, and I thought I would too, but after experiencing it for myself, I think it's handled really well. Going into the elimination ceremony, I had no idea who was actually getting the votes. So when it came down to Anastasia and Ted, I was stunned because it seemed like both of them were set for a deep run. But unlike other quote-unquote shocking eliminations in Disventure Camp, I think this one really works. The problem with a lot of eliminations in All-Stars is that they either didn't give enough setup to the person who would get eliminated, or they would eliminate someone who was contributing positively to the series over someone who was not. So either the eliminations didn't make sense, or there were clearly better options that they just ignored. But given that the blue team is pretty solid all around, I don't think there's one obvious character who's dragging them down. And it makes sense that Ted would receive the brunt of the votes because he was initially the girl's target in the first elimination. If Linda hadn't changed her mind last minute, Ted would have been the first boot. You expect a guy like Ted to weasel his way out of this situation, but from the girls' perspective, they have literally no reason to vote for anyone else. They just bonded with Logan, they have a tenuous alliance with Linda, and Richard left a far better first impression, so yeah, Ted going here does make sense. I don't want this season to get into the habit of always booting seemingly important characters early, because then we'll get to the merge and it'll be really bland. But this elimination works, both for the reasons I've just given and because, let's be honest, Ted is going to rejoin at some point. This is a 26-episode season with an 18-person cast, so unless they're going to load this season with nons, I think we can expect 1 or even 2 returnees, and if that's the case, I think Ted is a prime candidate. It's the same way I felt about Connor's elimination in All-Stars, it just doesn't feel like Ted's story is complete yet. But I guess that's something we'll just have to take a gamble on, because after all, life is like a game of poker, he's Ted Gordon. I don't think I can ever begin to describe to you what happened on that VC at 3 AM, but, I almost ruined Ted Gordon for myself, because for a long time, the only thing I could think of when I thought of Ted Gordon was that VC, and I'm glad I'm starting to move past that, because otherwise I probably would have driven my other friends insane. On the whole though, this is probably one of the best episodes we've gotten in quite some time. Even though I've been enjoying Season 4 thus far, in each of the prior episodes there's been at least one thing that I could point out as something that I don't like. But episode 4 doesn't have any of that. It's really good throughout, and honestly, I hope that this becomes the new standard for the series. As an episode of Disventure Camp, there's really not too much more to ask for. Good job, Odd Nations, I'm proud of you. And I think that just about covers everything. Keith Yeti, do you want to say anything to close off the video?
Where is your resort episode 3 review?
Okay, yeah, I did mention that. That's my bad. I'm gonna try to get to work on that soon. I'm gonna try, okay? I'll try to make it good. Can you cut me some slack? Do you forgive me?
No.
Huh, okay. Well, I guess no Madoka Magica for a month.
No, please, I'm sorry. Don't do this to me.